cloud, ChatGPT, Gemini, and now DeepSeek. I really feel that sooner or later, AI is going to replace my job. And right now, fearfully at least, I do not have a backup for if or when that happens. I mean, if I lost my job, then what I'll have to do is I'll have to go back home to Canada, which right now sounds like a third world country on X. And it's interesting because in the Americas, at least, the thought of or the action of moving back home is incredibly shameful. And how I see it is that it's probably worse to move back home than to have never left home at all. Because how I think about it is, if you lived in your parents' basement and you have never moved out, well, there's still potential. There's still potential that you are going to move out. You are going to find success after you moved out, and it's gonna stay that way. You're never gonna move back home again. But if you have moved out, that means that you have left the nest. That means that you have tried to make it out there in the world and you have failed. You have failed to make it out there in the world, so now you have to come back home and go live and mooch off your parents again. So I think that comparison makes it so that just the idea of moving back home is even worse than never having moved out at all. And I feel that that is where the shame comes from, underneath it all. So I remember about 5 years ago, I was living in DC, and back then I was still doing dance competitions, which means that I had to go and travel everywhere. And I usually pick like the cheapest plane ticket from whatever airport that was closer to me. And I had 3 airports at the time, right? Because in a DMV area, you got Dulles, you got DCA, and you got BWI. So I went to the Baltimore airport one time, and what I do is I do hotel or airport parking, the cheap airport parking, because if you park at the airport, it's really expensive, but there are some parking lots that gives you like $6 per day of parking. So you take those, and they'd have shuttles that actually shuttle you off to the airport. So parked at one of those cheap airport parking lots, and I met this woman. And she started to make small talk with me. And, you know, one of these older ladies, they always ask if you have children. And I was around 30 years old at that time. I said, no, I don't have children. I was like, how about you? Where are your children? Because I just automatically assumed that she had children. And she told me that she had, her firstborn was a son. She was really proud of him because she was saying how she was working at an executive position, this job. He had like 3 kids, a wife, and they owned their own home in Atlanta. And that she also had a daughter, her second born, which was not living in America at the time. She was over in the UK with her fiance, and she was working over there. She was really proud of both of them. And then she came on topic about her third son, and that's when the tune changed. So with her third son, the situation was completely different. He actually lost his job and he moved back in with his parents. And she was saying that, oh, he's just temporarily trying to figure out what's going on, but he really just moved back into our home again. And that's cool and all, except I noticed that she made a face and she kind of said that statement without a lot of enthusiasm, with kind of like a sigh. And that showed me that she was conflicted. So that reaction really struck me, because she said that her son was 33. So he was just a couple years older than I was. And I think that's one of the things that our Gen X and Boomer parents don't get about millennials and Gen Z, is the fact that things don't work the same way as when they were growing up. I mean, for Gen Xers, they don't understand that for millennials and Gen Z, we literally have to keep switching jobs in order to get a leg up. They don't understand that we don't want to get stuck in the same job for 40 years like what they did when they were doing their 9-to-5 slavery. Because in 2025, you don't get ahead that way. I remember, since as long as I remember, in high school and in university, my parents, despite my high ambition, always encouraged me that if I cannot become a doctor or a lawyer, which they knew I wasn't going to become because I had terrible grades, then I should get a government job. Why should I get a government job? Their reasoning is you should get a government job because it is safe, it has a government pension, there is union, so you can never get fired. All you have to do is work for 40 years and you're set. But what they don't see is that you cannot get ahead working at a government job. And with someone with high ambition that wants to get ahead, that is a literal death sentence. In our current economic environment, where we are facing faster inflation than ever before, I feel, where our wages do not keep up with inflation. Things like government jobs where you don't really get raises, or even corporate jobs, you don't get raises based on performance, right? Every single year, it's probably like 1 or 2% increase in your wage. It doesn't keep up with inflation, and you're not gonna make it. You're not gonna get ahead. So I think you can see this inflation most clearly in education. I Googled up the cost of tuition and board in Harvard in 1991, and it was around $20K per year. And now, I think the latest figures in 2019, for the same thing, it is $70K per year. Imagine where you go spend $70K per year to get a degree, a piece of paper, and you cannot get a job out of that. That's 2025. And to keep up with inflation, to get paid more, to get ahead, the game in 2025 is to keep on switching jobs every 1 or 2 years, because that's going to come along with a 10 to 40K pay raise. You're probably going to get equity with that or a sign-on bonus. And that's really the only way to get ahead. But our parents never really understood that. Why? Because they had the opportunity to work one job for their entire careers with, manageable raises. And they never had to face the crazy fast inflation that we're experiencing today. They didn't have to worry about competition coming from AI or robots that's happening today. They don't have to worry about layoffs that happened a lot in 2023 and 2024, and I expect it's going to happen a lot in 2025 as well. So with all that, it makes complete sense for Gen Zs or millennials to have to move back home in order to keep their heads above water. Because what happens is it's really the Gen Z and the millennials who get cut or laid off. Gen Xers and boomers, they are typically already in executive positions. So unless they retire, quit, or die, they're unlikely to leave those positions. They're unlikely to get fired. They're unlikely to get laid off. And that's what I think Gen Xers and boomers really don't understand. The position they're in is completely different from the positions that millennials and Gen Z find themselves in right now. So as I mentioned in my last video, what I found out about the dark side of home ownership, which you can check out right here. Every time I return back home, which is every year, I see my parents get older. I see my parents get grayer, more frail, their back is more bent, whereas last year they're much straighter. And I kind of feel sad that I don't get the opportunity to visit them as much as I want to anymore. So I can't visit much because here's the thing. After taxes are taken away and after I pay my rent, my take home is basically $64,000. And I honestly, even though some people can say that's a lot, I don't feel like is a lot, because that doesn't calculate into the fact of like personal learning, groceries, hobbies to do, and things like that. And to save you guys from doing the calculation, if you're really nosy, my pre-tax before anything is taken off is 110K. And I have goals of, starting a family and becoming the breadwinner. And I'm also thinking about retirement because I try to be responsible. So even though 100K may seem like a lot to a lot of people, I feel like in today's environment, 2025, 100K barely cuts it. That's why whenever I have off time after work, I go out there and I start doing my side hustles, like what I'm doing right now, you know, trying to make it on YouTube. And here's me preaching right now. Honestly, how I feel is that you better get something started, especially right now in 2025, before AI replaces your job and you're left out there homeless. We'll talk more about the AI stuff a little bit later, but I really think that we're living on the edge right now. So just to get back on the topic of moving back home, my parents still have a mortgage, you know. They really never made a dent on the mortgage for the past 30 years they've been raising us, because my dad was a very big gambler and still is. And you can check out this video right here if you want to learn more about that. And my mom raised us, I don't want to say alone because my dad was there, but she raised us without having a job. That was her job, being a mother, which is, I think, one of the most demanding unpaid jobs out there. So their house right now, they bought it for 240K or 270K in 95. Right now, it's around like a 1.5 mil, and that's their retirement fund. So what they do is, because they had such an increase in value on their property, that means that they can borrow more money against it. They can use the house as leverage to borrow money to live off of in their retirement, which they're doing right now. So when they die, that 270K plus whatever they borrowed, that's gonna have to be paid off by my brother and I. Hopefully there won't be a big disaster like what happened in California with the wildfires. Hopefully there won't be an earthquake that will completely destroy our house and cause property values to plummet. But since I live in the USA, when both my parents die, my brother will be the only one, and that's a lot of house for one person. So I think we'd probably sell it to pay off whatever debt my parents use for their retirement. But that's how it's gonna be. What a deal, eh? So I'm pretty sure that my parents aren't the only ones that are running up this scheme. My uncle is also doing the same thing. So, you know, what they're doing is they're using their properties to fund their retirement, and whatever debt they have left behind, they're just gonna leave for their children when they inherit the home. And I used to be pretty angry about this fact, thinking, how could you do this? How can you be so selfish, leaving your kids with a bunch of debt rather than assets when you die? That's so effing selfish. But right now I am pretty stoic about it, because how I see it is that my parents are pretty good about it. My parents probably took out around 50 or 70K because they really needed it for home repairs. But other than that, they fund their retirement through old age security pension, which is you know, the seniors allowance that they get from the government, and from the rent that they get from our tenants. So they use that in order to fund their day-to-day. You know, I'd be happy to pay off whatever debt they incurred in their retirement with their spending habits right now, which isn't that bad, knowing that I get, you know, like a $1.5 million property that I'm gonna split with my brother after they pass. You know, conversely, I don't know anyone personally, but I would assume that there are some other parents that are doing the same thing, but they're going all out. They're maxing it out, and as much as they can borrow it, they borrow it all, and they spend it all for their retirement and leave their kids with basically nothing or even a little bit of debt when they die. That is selfish. So despite the situation that I'm currently in, it's nice to know that I can return home if I lose my job, and that I'd have somewhere to plan out what I'm gonna do next while not have to worry about, can I make rent the next month? But should I actually lose my job and move back in with my parents, pretty sure I'm gonna finally get a chance to work at McDonald's that I never got a chance to when I was a teenager. So about the story of McDonald's, I've never been able to work at McDonald's because I was actually applied when I was a kid, but They never hired me because as a kid, I wasn't able to speak to people. I was always very shy, very introverted. If you meet me today, I'm still pretty shy and introverted, I say. When I meet people, I just listen a lot and I'm pretty silent. If you meet me in real life, it's gonna be that way. But if you enjoy the storytelling so far, just know that I'm not a natural storyteller. What I do is I write a kind of like a preliminary script with all my ideas of what I want to say. And I use this AI that I developed, keepviews.com, and I throw in the script and the AI will tell me which parts needs a little bit more loving, which parts are really good, which parts suck. And then I will start working on the parts that suck, the parts that needs a little bit more loving. So if you're a content creator as well and you're storytelling like I am, and you want to check out or improve your scripts, then you could do so by going to keepviews.com. So to give you guys an idea of my routine these days, basically it's I wake up and I spend 30 minutes in bed just watching YouTube videos, and it's kind of research and recon, gives me ideas of what kind of videos to make. But recently, what's been happening is that I've been getting a lot of videos about white-collar workers being laid off and struggling to find jobs. And it's pretty incredible because AI is just progressing like crazy. I mean, ChatGPT came out in November of 22. Let's just round that up and say 23. And 2 years later, we have so many other competitors, like we have ChatGPT, including itself, we have Gemini, Cloud, and now we have DeepSeek, which apparently just kicked all those other AIs out of the bucket in terms of cost. They said DeepSeek was developed with $6 million or something, which now I just recently read on X like 20 minutes ago that was a lie coming out of China, and it's more around like $1.5 billion or something, I think. But here I am looking at this accelerated process, and I'm thinking, man, I'm really gonna be out of a job in 4 to 5 years. Like, unlike my parents, who in the past could just work one job for their entire lives and be able to raise children on that one job, that's not the same situation that we have today anymore. They didn't have competition like AI to worry about that will sneak up behind us and take our jobs, which is something I'm seriously worried about right now. I mean, today they're already replacing people in management roles, in marketing roles, in middle management roles. So it's just a matter of time. I'm not holding my breath that software engineering jobs will also be taken in the near future. I'm 90% sure that that will happen. And when my job gets replaced and when I get fired, I don't think that expanding my skill set in other areas of tech is going to help the case. It's going to help me find another job because I'm a Ruby on Rails developer. And if I get fired as a Rails developer, and we're pretty rare as it is, then chances are other companies will also be following suit and they won't be really looking for Ruby on Rails developers at all. So what I'm thinking is that if I get fired, then I'll probably have to just completely switch industries, not be a white-collar worker anymore, not be in tech anymore. I don't know. Maybe I'm just gonna go and do like a 2-year training to learn how to do HVAC. But yeah, I don't really have a backup plan for what will happen when AI replaces my job. So I think that when AI replaces my job and I become unemployed, I think that during that time, I definitely have to move in with my parents because that is the quickest way to save on rent. And it's gonna suck because I survived 20 years of my mom's nagging. I moved out only to move back in and handle that nagging again. I am not excited about that, but I think that is a necessary evil. You know, it's a 1 step forward, 2 steps back. The 2 steps back is you're gonna save on rent and you're gonna save on utilities and food. And 1 step forward is you get to plan on what to do next. So if you grew up in North America, you must feel that there is just so much shame associated with moving back in with your parents. And I really think that mindset came from the generations of Gen X and boomers when they were up and rising, they were coming up, they were adults making it. But the environment that we live in now is completely different from theirs. We're fighting robots. We're fighting corrupted politicians with corrupted policies that is driving inflation like crazy and rooting it for us younger folks. So did my grandpa or my dad have to compete against not only other humans, but AI, robots, and corrupted politicians driving prices higher than any time in history? No, they didn't. Did they live in the same environment that we millennials and Gen Zs are living in right now? No, they didn't. And I think the environment today is more competitive than it was any time in the past. So I don't think there is any shame in moving back in with your parents. Whenever someone says, yeah, I had no choice to keep my head above water, I had to go back home, live with my parents again to save on rent, I say, good job. I think that was the best and most logical decision you could have made for you now and for your future. So, I don't know, what do you think about this whole thing of feeling shame for moving back in with your parents, whether you're a parent or whether you're someone who actually did it? Let me know in the comments below, and if you enjoyed this video, check out this wild one I made right here.